Mai te tipua, mai te tahita, mai te kāhui o ngā riki, mai te whiwhiki ngā tua. O i ka takina te Māori, ko te Māori i ahua noa ki runga ki nei tāura, ki runga ki nei tauira. Kia tau te Māori ki runga ki tēnei ope kia puta ki te whai ao ki te ao mārama uhi. Wero, tau mai te Māori, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Tēnei te ruru te kaukau mai nei ki hai mahi titi ki hai marakaraka. Te upokoni o te ruru te rekou, he pō, he ao, ka watea, tihei Māori ora. Hoi no rā, mihi ana kia tātou kua pai mai nei te pō nei, ki tēnei kaupapa. Tēnei kaupapa, e whakakotahi nei i a tātou, e whakakotahi nei i ngā iwi, o tirā, maroto mai e nei mahi, e whakakotahi ana, i a tātou kōrero, i a tātou pūrākau. E mihi ana ki tēnā o koutou, i whai wāhi mai ki tēnei kaupapa. Kua riro mai te hōnore ki au, ki te whakatūwhera, ki te mihi atu ki a tātou i tēnei pō, tēnā tātou. Tika o ki rā, kia mihi a rātou, kua haere ki tua o pairau rātou, kua hiri tuara mai ki tua o wainuku mamao, ki o tātou tini mate. No reira, ko ngā mate kei runga i a koutou, mauria mai rā, pikauria mai, ki runga ki o mātou mate, kia mihia, kia tangihia tahiti ai, ka tukuna atu ai rātou, ki te pō. Tau ārai ki te pō tītoko ki te ao mārama, karangate kaupapa. Tēnei kaupapa e whakawhanake nei i ngā mātauranga, e whakarangi whāwhā ana i ngā kōrero a tēnei tangata. Nānei tuhi mai e nei kōrero, hei kōrero tuku iho ki a tātou, e mihi ana ki tērā kaupapa. E mihi ana ki āna mahi rangahau, o tirā ki ngā tāngata, ki o mātou tipuna, i kōrero tahi ki āia, i āta tuku, i o rātou mātauranga, i o rātou mōhiotanga ki āia, kia tae ai e ia e nei kōrero te whakaputa atu ki te ao. No reira, e mihi ana ki a tātou i tērā ahuatanga. He mihi poto tēnei, he mihi aroha tēnei ki a tātou mai te takere o te ngākau. No reira, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Manu tiria, manu aramia ki te poho te raka katau, re katau mai te ruhi e tau e koia. Koia koka riki ki mai, maui e harai te whitsu me te waru e.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Tuatahi e te kā karakia. Thank you for your karakia. And mihi on behalf of Mana Whenua. We still have 2 seats at the front if anybody wants to take the advantage, and some at the back, so please do sit down. So good evening everyone, and welcome to the Hocken Collections. Ko waio, no ingarangia hau, ingari ke Ōtepoti o e noha ana anaine, ko mai ko Ōtākou Whakaihu, ko au te tunuaki o te whare puka ki Ōtākou Whakaihu Waka. So I'm Mike Wall, I'm the University Librarian, and I'm your MC for this evening. I'd like firstly to mihi Kellyanne Tahi, who is our acting Hocken Librarian. Unfortunately, she's not able to be your MC tonight, but I know she's super excited about this evening and what's to come. So we are gathering here to celebrate and to launch the digital collections of Herries Beattie's papers. These papers are held here at the Hocken Collections. It isn't a coincidence that we're doing this today, as today is Beattie's birthday. He would have been 143. And it's wonderful to have with us tonight a number of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and even great-great-grandchildren of James Herries Beatties, who've all travelled to Ōtepoti, especially for this event. We have a number of speakers for you tonight who will highlight the significance of Beattie and his papers. Just to give you a bit of a timeline, probably up to 45 minutes. But before we get started, I ought to do the housekeeping. So the whare paku are to my right, the toilets. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow staff directions, but essentially through the entrance that you arrived through and congregate outside. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Janet Watson. Janet is the youngest of 5 living grandchildren of Herries Beatties. Her mother was Mary Roden Smith, the eldest daughter of Herries Beatties. Janet studied here at the University of Otago, if you don't mind me saying, in the 1970s, followed by teacher training in Christchurch, and then she taught at Wellington at East Girls College and the New Zealand Correspondence School. She lives in, it says here, sunny Wellington, with her husband John, and they have 4 adult children and 6 grandchildren. And Janet has been a family contact for the Hocken Library over several years, so welcome, Janet.
Ena mana, ena reo, tēnā koutou katoa. Ki te mana whenua, Ngāi Tahu, ka te mamoi, waitaha, tēnā koutou. Oh, yep. Ki ka kaimahi o te whare te oko, hakena, tēnā koutou. Kei te tuo, hei mangai, mate, whanau, Beattie. Ka nui te hare me te koa, ki te hare ki tēnei whakatū wharatanga. He mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Ka huri ki te reo Pākehā. To the many peoples and voices, I acknowledge you all. To the mana whenua, Ngāi Tahu, ka te mamoi, waitaha, I greet you. To the staff of the Hocken Library, I greet you. I'm standing as a representative of the Beattie whānau. I'm delighted that we can be here at this launch. Thank you to Anna Blackman, Head Curator Archives, for keeping us so updated with developments with Grandpa's writings, and a special thank you to Rowena Scott Fife, Māori Archivist, for organising this event and for your patience and willingness to answer all my questions. You've been brilliant to liaise with. I don't know where you are. Oh, there you are. Sorry. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for Professor Ballantyne for the contact you made with us in Wellington when you were there, and the articles you shared with us, which you'd written on Grandpa's work. We're delighted to hear that you're writing a book about Grandpa. Out of Grandpa's 92 descendants, I think that's right. Hang on, here today are 3 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, plus 3 spouses, and 1 great-great-grandson. And there's also a great-great-grandson who's got Herries Beattie in his name. I can't remember. It's Brendan right here. Yeah. It's Brendan Herries James Beattie. Yep. Yeah, famous. Anyway, we, Grandpa's descendants, honour, admire and respect our grandfather for his life and work over many years devoted to recording the history of New Zealand Māori, their customs, traditions and languages, including thousands of Māori place names in the South Island. Also recording the history of early New Zealand European settlers. We are proud of him. I remember as a child visiting Grandpa in Waimate in the school holidays. He always met us at the Studham Junction railway station with the taxi. He had very white hair, like me, and a gentle manner. He would often sit on a high-back chair in the dining room, that's how I remember him, of the old house in Harris Street, reading a book. Sometimes he ordered a taxi to take us on a picnic by the river in Kelsey's Bush in Waimate, where we all enjoyed hearing the tuis and bellbirds. My sister Rosemary, who's here today, remembers that he had porridge for breakfast with a little salt, and he drank boiled water every day. He was quietly spoken and always neatly dressed. He liked to reminisce and tell stories and jokes, and often sat at his desk writing. He often went off on his famous bike too, to do shopping and other errands. My sister Christine remembers him as a humble, gentle man with twinkling blue eyes, and that every year he was sure to put money in our post office savings accounts. Catherine Kells nee Beattie, who is here, also granddaughter, whose father's name was Herries James Beattie rather than James Herries Beattie, was generally called Jim. She remembers Grandpa staying with her family in Wellington. He spent each day, all day, at the Alexander Turnbull Library. Catherine also remembers him rubbing brown sugar and salt into the Christmas ham which was hanging in the outside pantry in Waimate, and him singing old hymns at the top of his voice while stirring the porridge on the old cold range. Her brother Alistair Beattie, who would have loved to have been here tonight, used to ride Grandpa's old bike when the family was staying there. Also the rows of gooseberry bushes, which I used to love eating, and we all loved standing there eating gooseberries, in the back garden were a big attraction for us grandchildren. Catherine and Alistair, well especially Alistair, aimed a few at Grandpa as he came out of the house one day, and one of which hit Grandpa on his neck that he didn't have was exposed, at which he turned around and said, "When I catch you, I'll sort ya." So I just wanted to quote something from one of Grandpa's books. I've been reading a few, or dipping into them lately, and here are a few excerpts I especially enjoyed. I quote, he said, "I liked the old people, and the longer I knew them, the more I liked them. I hope and believe the affection was mutual. It was a pleasure to gather information from the oldest generation alive in the years 1900 to 1920. They were mostly so glad someone was writing down the lore, L-O-R-E, they had maintained amid the increasing flood of Europeanisation that was overtaking their race." Another paragraph which made me chuckle is written in the afterword of Tikau Talks. And so Grandpa says, "My interviews with him, Tikau, extended over a fortnight, and he was always the ideal an interviewer sets his hope upon, for he was kindly, patient, obliging, urbane and informative. My liking and respect for him grew as the days passed. He dictated old songs to me, and for 2 whole days I did nothing but painfully and laboriously write down numerous genealogies and songs. Then he asked to see how I had written one of the songs, after which he eyed me aghast and said, 'You have got all the main words correct, but you have put in no grammar.' Then Grandpa says, 'How can I?' I said. 'I never could learn English grammar at school, so how can I master Maori grammar now?' So his faith or confidence in my powers was sadly shaken, and thereafter he confined himself to English. He felt no doubt that though the scribe was shaky and faulty, half a loaf was better than no bread, and we were soon on the old footing again." In his book, Our Southernmost Maoris, he says, "While the old people were alive, I was an honoured guest on quite a few occasions. One happy memory is arriving unexpectedly at Temuka on my trusty bike and proceeding to the Maori Haika to find a big hui was in progress. A large marquee had been erected on the marae of the Maori Hall, and a banquet was just beginning. The doorkeeper hospitably asked me in, and hot and dusty as I was from a long bike ride, I accepted and slipped into a place near the door, to find myself the only Pākehā present and about 200 Māori. The leading men of the South Island were on the dais at the other end, and one of them spied me. The next thing I knew was that he came down past the long tables and led me up to the dais to the place of honour. I felt touched and was inwardly reminded of our Lord's words, but when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Grandpa had a strong personal faith in God and believed that the Bible was the Word of God. He discovered this for himself when he was working in his father's draper's shop in Gore. Determined not to judge a book before reading it, he took a New Testament to work, and when there was no one looking, he would pull it out and read it. He was later a Sunday school superintendent and a Bible class leader in his congregational church in Gore. My brother Alan Harry Smith, who cannot be here today, but he made sure as many as possible of Grandpa's descendants could be here. He writes that when he was a medical student at the University of Otago, he visited Grandpa in Waimate at the end of most terms for a couple of days. Grandpa was always standing on the platform of the Studham Junction railway station, waiting for me as the train pulled in. I used to wonder if I would get to pump up the tyres and ride his old bicycle on this visit. Alan was very impressed by Grandpa's research methods of getting round the South Island by train and bike and interviewing large numbers of people, using hundreds of questions and writing down the answers down exactly as spoken, but says not everyone was impressed. And Alan says, on several occasions, Grandpa would mention to me that the faculty at Otago University did not respect his work. He would say this very quietly and without anger and move on to the next topic. Then I admired him even more. He pursued his goals, whatever the academics thought, of his time thought. During Alan's years as Professor of Epidemiology at the University of California, Berkeley, he used Grandpa's method of having detailed interviews with large numbers of participants very successfully in his research into the effects of arsenic and water supplies on people's health. He did this in Argentina, Chile, and Bangladesh and India. And I quote Alan again, "To get success, you have to get out of your office and go and work in the field, just like Grandpa did." I am delighted that Grandpa's work has once again been recognised, this time by the Hocken Library of the University of Otago. And he says, "I wish, way back then, that I had said to Grandpa, one day your work will be recognised." Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I would like to ask Greg up, and Greg is there. Oh, yeah, okay, Toby. Great grandson. Some number of greats. Yeah. Here's the son of Kirsty and Greg, and Kirsty is a great granddaughter. Yeah.
Tuia ki te rangi, tuia ki te whenua, tuia ki te ngākau o ngā tangata katoa. Ko te mea nui, ko te aroha. A tihei Māori ora. E whakawhetai ana ki te mātanui i te rangi. Kia tau iho tōna manaakitanga ki runga i tēnei huihuinga. Tōna rangi Māori e ki runga i tēnei minenga. Haere i ngā mate. Haere i runga i o koutou waka. Haere i runga i ngā maunga kōrero a o tupuna. Moi mai i roto i te whenua. Ki te mana whenua, e pupiru tonu nei I te Māori o tēnei whenua, a kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi ki a koutou. Ki ngā kaimahi, ngā kāko me ngā tauira o tēnei whare wānanga, kei te mihi ki a koutou, mō o koutou manaakitanga ki a mātou. E hui ana mātou ki te whakawhānui, ki te whakanui I o mātou tupuna me ona mahi, nō reira kei te mihi ki a koutou. Ki a koutou katoa, kei te mihi, ai, ko Toby taku ingoa, e hara ahau I te Greg, ko au tāna tama, I mua I tēnei hui, ki oku whakaro, ka kōrero tōku pāpā, engari I roto I tōna aroha nui ki a hau. I kōwhiri ia ki te tuku tērā haipapa ki a hau. Nō reira, e tūana ahau ki te kōrero ki a koutou. E haere mai ana mātou, I runga I te aroha o ihukraeti, o te matua, o te tama me te wairua tapu. Nō reira, e mutu ana ahau I tēnei mihi me ngā kupu o Kiriniti tuatahi. Nā, tēnei te maunei, te tūmanako, te aroha me te whakapono. Ēnei e toru. Ko te mea nui rawa ia o ēnei, ko te aroha. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
E toru ngā mea nunui, e ki ana, te pai pera, whakapono, tumanako, ko te mea nui, ko te
Kia ora, thank you both for your korero. Beattie was a prolific writer and record keeper. During his lifetime, he published extensively, including 27 books, as well as many journal articles, most notably in the Journal of Polynesian Society. His name may probably most be well known in relation to the book Traditional Lifeways of the Southern Māori, which was published after his death and edited by Athol Anderson. Probably a first step towards this digitisation project that we've just completed was the transcription of the manuscripts, and Carolyn Campbell, who's here, was heavily involved in that. So, that's an interesting transition from something that was a manuscript to printed and now digital. This landmark publication on Southern Māori has recently been reprinted, and we have the University Bookshop here tonight, and they do have limited numbers of the book available for sale after the speeches. The Beattie papers have been an extremely valuable source for researchers, especially Ngāi Tahu researchers. They wouldn't have been digitised without the support of local mana whenua, including Ōtākou, Puketaraki and Moiraki, and the Ngāi Tahu Archives. This project has delivered the first tranche of records to be digitised as part of the Hocken Collections Ngāi Tahu digitisation programme. On behalf of the project team, I'd like to thank members of the Ngāi Tahu digitisation advisory group, some of you who are here tonight. Thank you for your input and support. This project recognises that invaluable contribution. I would like to acknowledge in particular the passing of Rua McCallum, who represented to Runaka or Moraki on the advisory group. Moe mai rā. Our next speaker is Helen Brown. Helen is the Archives Manager Research in the Ngāi Tahu Archives at Te Runanga or Ngāi Tahu. She works with Ngāi Tahu communities on history and memory projects, including oral histories, exhibitions, interpretation and publications. Some of those publications are drawn from information held here within Hocken Collections, and the Hocken staff would like to thank Helen and her archivist colleagues, Jill Durney, who retired last month, and Gabrielle Faith, who has joined us this evening. Helen leads the Ngāi Tahu Archive Publishing Programme, which includes the award-winning Tangata Ngāi Tahu series, which explores tribal histories through the lens of biography. She also works on content for the Ngāi Tahu Digital Atlas, Ka Hurumani, and the database Ka Reo. Kia ora, Helen.
Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi mahana ki a koutou. Ka mihi nui ki ka whanauku o Kaitahu, ka mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. I'm very excited about the launch of this project. Primarily as a researcher, I'm very excited to meet members of Beattie's whānau for the first time, and I can sort of see a bit of a family resemblance. Rā whānau kia koe e te rangatira James Herries Beattie. Thank you for your distinctive, neat and highly legible handwriting. Thank you for travelling by train and bicycle to isolated Kaitahu communities to meet with our kaumātua. Thank you for your obsessive approach to interviewing and recording information from them, and especially for recording their names. Thank you for becoming interested in Māori law from such an early age and for sticking at your obsession for so many years. Thank you for meticulously writing articles and keeping notes. Thank you for publishing all 27 of those books. Their cloth covers are getting faded, but they still grace many of our bookshelves. Actually, some are as rare as hen's teeth and sell for ridiculous sums. As a former bookseller, you'd be amazed. Even a shabby copy of Gore and surrounding districts with coffee stains goes for a minimum of about $70 these days. Thank you for continuing to collect information and to write up unpublished material which you had previously collected years prior in your series of notebooks, which are cared for now here at the Hocken. Thank you for the discombobulating yet descriptive and sometimes entertaining titles of said notebooks, bearing names like, quote, General Māori Information, items from my notebooks 1915 to 1942, not stroked out and now gathered together, close quote. Thank you for meticulously cutting out all those newspaper clippings and annotating them with their sources. Thank you for saving your personal correspondence and for taking the time to summarise your outward responses to those inward letters on those inward letters themselves. Thank you especially for that eclectic collection of letters from Māoris and half-castes. Thank you for only burning your field notes in 1963 and not the whole shebang. Thank you for expressing doubt about things where you were uncertain, and for being willing to accept, evaluate, and recognise other people's opinions. Thank you for borrowing notebooks and maps from our kaumātua and then respectfully returning them. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your dense lists of Māori place names and copious accompanying notes covering a period of more than 60 years. And above all, thank you for valuing the oral testimony of our tipuna and for writing it down. James Herries Beattie is everywhere in the Ngāi Tahu Archive. References, transcripts and scratchy photocopies of his notebooks appear in the collections of the Ngāi Tahu Māori Trust Board, the Waitangi Tribunal evidence for the Ngāi Tahu claim, the collections of Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu, and in the personal papers of esteemed individuals such as Tātipini O'Regan and Trevor House. Beattie's published works are also held in our book collections, gifted to the archive from people such as Kiri Hume, Harry Everson, Trevor House and Tātipini. We have also, within our team, purchased many of these titles, sometimes at great expense, Tākare Norton, for use as working copies at various times. And we've pored over this material at numerous hui throughout the Ngāi Tahu Takiwā. And there's many people here this evening who've been present at those wānanga where we're all sitting around as big groups of whānau trying to understand the place names that he published and then published again slightly differently and then published again, and trying to trace back the footsteps of his sort of growing understanding. There's a few people nodding their heads who know what I'm talking about there. If you search Beattie in the Ngāi Tahu Archive database Kariao, I did it today, it returns 282 results. One is for Governor General Sir David Beattie, but the rest are for Herries. Beattie's name appears in the Ngāi Tahu Cultural Mapping Project, wait for this, a staggering 2,764 times out of a total of 4,412 entries. So our Cultural Mapping Project is our online digital atlas, which has a kind of, there's about 1,500 names currently surfaced publicly, but it's actually a broader project. So in total, we have recorded 4,412. Of those, my maths is poor, but my colleagues have advised me that it's approximately 2/3 of that total owe something to Beattie in the referencing. So really, Beattie's work is foundational to that project. And since the Ngāi Tahu Archive team was formed in 2012, the archive has existed for much longer, but we came together as a team and we're resourced and have built up numbers since that time. Beattie has been a constant companion. This is why it's so lovely to know that the family are here. His iterative approach to publication, which I referred to earlier, has seen us chasing place names through time and documents to reach final conclusions, which actually include, ultimately place name changes on maps. So us taking, we have to take evidence to the New Zealand Geographic Board in order to have a place name formally amended, altered or added to New Zealand maps. And we've done that on a number of occasions. And Herries Beattie is a big part of a lot of those applications. I really want to congratulate the Hocken on this project, and Arohina and Anna and the rest of the team, and also my fellow committee members. Sorry I didn't attend all the hui. I'm just, as I said, really excited and looking forward to what we can do with this information. I'm looking forward to, I love coming down here, but I'm looking forward to not having to harass your staff to copy something random for me or look at something for me because I can't make it down here. And I'm looking forward to the input that we can have to enriching the records that you create. So there's a partnership project at play here. We in the Ngāi Tahu Archive will be bringing the records across into our system as well. So they'll be able to be accessed through Kariao, which is the Ngāi Tahu Archive database, as well as through the Hocken's system. There's just a couple of little anecdotes, I guess, that I wanted to end with. The first is, it's not really an anecdote, but it's a story that a lot of us in our team do refer to, and it's about this man called Tieki Pokirako, who was a noted authority on the Māori place names of the Waitaki region. And he was regarded as the last mokehi navigator of the Waitaki. He was born in 1848 and spent most of his life living in the Waitaki region. And he was an expert at constructing mokehi. So these are flax staff rafts, which are made from raupo or korari, that's the flower stems of flax, very buoyant, used for travelling along waterways, particularly throughout southern Te Waipounamu. So Pokirako had an extensive navigational knowledge of the Waitaki River and at one time worked as a ferryman at the river mouth. And up to the early 20th century, Tieki continued to make annual mahingakai expeditions into Te Manahuna, that's the Mackenzie Basin, where he gathered birds and tuna to be preserved and stored for the upcoming winter months. And over years of occupation and use of the Waitaki, Pukirako obtained an intimate knowledge of the traditional Māori place names throughout that catchment. And as fortune would have it, in December 1915, Herries Beattie travelled to Glenavy to interview another Ngāi Tahu man, Tāri Te Maiharoa. And while Beattie was waiting to interview Tāri, he met Tieki Pukirako for the first time. And Pukirako arrived unexpectedly and presented Herries with 2 long lists of Māori place names of the Waitaki. Beattie recalled that Pukirako, quote, went to the trouble of laboriously writing them out and presenting them to a comparative stranger and without having been approached or solicited in any way, close quote. He also refers to the lists being written on sheets of paper in big childlike writing. These lists are here. We've got them on our system, which you can see through Kariao. But one of these lists outlined the place names on the northern bank of the Waitaki, and the second list outlines the place names on the southern bank. And these, along with Herries Beattie's annotations, provide an incredibly detailed account of more than 100 place names of creeks, islands, ponds, gullies, springs, and many other landmarks located throughout the Waitaki Valley. In Beattie's fashion, he published these in the Otago Daily Times as part of that incredible series, the Southern Māori Stray Papers, which our colleague, the late Liz Marker, transcribed all of those. You guys might want them. And some of that material was then republished in his other books, so Māori Place Names of Canterbury, Māori Place Names of Otago. And Beattie and Pukirako maintained a friendship over the years. Beattie would go and visit him. And it's thanks to this serendipitous meeting that we have this rich taonga, this information about the Waitaki. And this is just one of many, many little stories and anecdotes that we could share. The last thing I wanted to mention is a kind of eureka moment that I personally had with working with Beattie's material. So this relates to the 6 maps. So they're printed maps. They're not actually held here at the Hocken. They're in the Turnbull. I don't know why they're there or how they got to be there. We haven't uncovered that. But there's 6 maps of Murihiku, of Southland and Otago region. And they are covered in red, that beautiful handwriting, place names all over them. So 6 separate maps, and Ian Gover, our GIS sort of expert, he digitally has knitted them all together into one big map, and it's incredible. And we were down doing a mapping hoi at Te Rau Aroha Marae at Awarua at Bluff, and we'd been studying these place names and noting where they were, and noting that probably about a third of them had the letters P, D after them. And I guess this was sort of early in our journey with understanding what Beattie did. And nobody knew what this PD after these place names meant. And that evening, as everyone was, settling down to, it was dark, we're all lying on our mattresses, everybody was starting to go to sleep, someone was snoring. I suddenly sat up and said to the room, published. That's what the PD meant, that he'd published it, because he had this obsession with this name was published and this one was published and this one was published, so therefore he wouldn't publish them in the next round. So I look forward to many more similar eureka moments in engaging and working with James Herries Beattie's material. So ngā mihi nui, kia ora.
Tatahi te huri huri e te ki a ka wani a rehua arai te uru whakatopa o parira I ka piki ka heke tukaha ara ki matatu e.
Thank you so much, Helen. And I think what you've just described is, while we've got to the end of the project, this is just the beginning of how everyone can use the resources that are digitised. So thank you. Before I introduce our final speaker, I have a few other people to thank for helping us get to this project coming to the end. So first of all, the funding for the project has come from a University Alumni grant. So thank you to Sheila Murray for organising that for us. But also university equity funding has supported this work as well. The team from New Zealand Micrographics, especially the image technicians who worked here, Tina and Jessica, thank you. We also need to thank the UNESCO Memory of the World, Aotearoa New Zealand. I should also thank my colleagues, especially Anna Blackman, Rohina, David, Bailey, Kate, Richard, Tanya, Kari, Judith, Kerry, and the whole of the Hocken Researcher Services team. Narongo, who's our summer intern here, as well as the library administration staff. Finally, I'd also like to thank two former colleagues, Lynn Benson, who is here this evening, and also Catherine Hammond. Without all of their input and others, we wouldn't have got to this point within the project. So our final speaker has been a staunch advocate for ensuring that Herries Beattie's papers get the recognition that they truly deserve. Tony Ballantyne is a professor in the history programme at the University of Otago, Ōtākou Whakaihu Waka, and it is great to be able to use our new Māori name, Ōtākou Whakaihu Waka. He has published extensively on the history of the modern British Empire, on histories of empire and colonisation in New Zealand. But being born and raised here in Ōtepoti, he's especially interested in the histories of the south of Te Waipounamu. He's been an enthusiastic user of the Beattie collection for a range of his publications, including work on the place and society, societal mobility, community formation in Gore, and on Herries Beattie himself as a collector and writer. Tony, thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, te whare e tūnei, te whenua e te koto nei, tēnā korua. Kina mauna whakahi, kina wai tere nei, kina rangatira huhua, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Kina mate o te wā, rātou kui a whetu rangatia, haere, haere, moi mai rā. Rātou ki a rātou, tātou ki a tātou. He mihi nui ki te mana whenua o tēnei rohi, wai taha ka te mamoi Ngāi Tahu. He mihi hoki ki te hau kaika, mō tō rātou tātoko i tēnei kaupapa. I te kai karakia, i tēnei pō, Kiringāua, tēnā koe. I te kai whakataki Mike, nā mihi nui ki a koe. Tēnā hoki koutou i nā kai kōrero katoa o tēnei pō. He mihi nui ki nā uri o Herries Beattie, tēnā koutou. I nā rangatira, i nā homahi, i nā tangata katoa, tēnā koutou. Koa he mihi poto tēnei, he mihi aroha. Nō reira e homa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'm so excited to be here and just incredibly honoured to be asked to speak on this occasion. I am a history geek, and at the centre of my geekdom is Herries Beattie. So it's fantastic to have the opportunity to say a few words and again to acknowledge all that we've heard this evening already, which has just been fantastic. The Beattie papers are an incredibly, I think, significant collection, and this digitisation project is a really critical undertaking, important for local runaka and for Ngāi Tahu whānui more generally. I think as Helen's comments made clear. Important, as Helen also underlined, for research more generally. Important for staff and students here at the University of Otago, Ōtākou Whakaihu Waka. and I think, as Janet made clear as well, important for the descendants of Herries Beattie. This collection is quite simply a remarkable body of materials, compiled, shaped, reshaped, reshaped again, indexed, and indexed again over 8 decades of intellectual work. That's incredible. Beginning as a boy of 11, Beattie was an enthusiastic writer and collector, and he pursued those intellectual interests, passions, alongside his developing career as a bookkeeper, a journalist, a librarian, and a bookseller. His interests as a collector were expansive, ranging across natural history, especially birds. He was an enthusiastic bird nester as a young boy. Place names, local history, Māori oral history, tribal narratives, and traditional lifeways. He was worried about the loss of knowledge in the south, especially as a result of land loss, Māori land loss, population decline, and cultural change. But he also wanted to record the stories of important places and pioneering families for future generations. So if you're from the south, if your family's from the south, you can have the strange experience of suddenly stumbling across a great-great-grandfather, as I did, or 2 great-grandfathers arguing against each other in court, referred to in the Beattie papers. He pursued these questions through relentless reading, so it's great to hear the family memories of him reading in a high back chair. Through the production of voluminous clippings books, interviewing the knowledgeable and the elderly, exchanging materials with other collectors, and through research trips taken by train, by bike, and on foot into Mihi to Rohina for their fantastic piece in the paper at the weekend on Beattie as the pedal-powered ethnographer. So if you didn't see that, check that out. So fantastic piece. So I think the collection of materials that Beattie accumulated and gifted to the Hocken is almost certainly the richest collection focused on a particular region held in any New Zealand repository. If anyone wants to take a bet on that, I'll take your money. I think the other thing about them is that they're incredibly rich and richly textured, and they're a voluminous guide to the history of southern New Zealand in the 19th century, as well as an invaluable starting point and repository for the study of Waitaha, Katemamui and Ngāi Tahu in the preceding centuries. Beattie's materials on Ngāi Tahu Whanui are especially rich, reflecting the close relationships he established with a range of knowledgeable people, men and women, authoritative informants, and community leaders across Te Waipounamu. And that story about Pukurako is a really good example of that. And given the range and depth of the collection, it is not surprising that it was mobilised in the work for the Ngāi Tahu claim, something that Helen alluded to. Beattie's papers were indispensable for researchers, both those working for Ngāi Tahu and those working for the Crown. The significance of the collection is clearly visible in the footnotes of submissions, in the research papers, and in the final reports themselves. And it's important to remember that the decision to actually publish traditional lifeways of Southern Māori, the outcome of the 1920 Ōtākou Museum project, a project that's just grew and grew and grew as Beattie's list of questions grew from about 180 to over 1,000. The decision to publish that was spurred by the fact that material was being used so heavily in the claims process. There were concerns about the future of the manuscript. And it is also no surprise that some leading Ngāi Tahu scholars, and here I'm thinking of people especially like Ethel himself, Tā Tipene, Mike Stevens, have engaged with Beattie's work in really significant ways. And we see it, I think, really strongly imprinted in the 2 volumes of Tangata Ngāi Tahu biographies. As Helen mentioned, Beattie had an abiding commitment to recording place names. Across many decades of work, he built up maps and lists, wrote many essays and newspaper articles, and a number of books on place names, both Māori and Pākehā. Those newspaper stories and manuscripts have been, as Helen mentioned, very important sources for the work of the Ngāi Tahu Archives team, and are absolutely central in that Kahuru Manu, which is an amazing resource for all people who live here in the south, that rich digital cultural atlas of place names and histories. The thing I want to say about the place names is I think it's important to understand them within the context of Pākehā society at that time as well. That work, he was undertaking that work, he was publishing those stories at a point in time when most Pākehā were very happy to disregard the connection between mana whenua and whenua. But here he spent time across many decades recording those connections. So he recorded those many stories and versions of stories, often in varying and sometimes competing accounts of rivers, of mountains, of hills, pathways, coastal features, and important places. And I think that's an incredibly rich repository for all of us that live here in the south. And I think it will be an important and ongoing resource as we restore and recover the stories of the land and the waters that we live on. The collection is also just full of people, stories of important tupuna and influential rangatira, of sealers and whalers, of explorers and gold miners, sheep rustlers, surveyors, railwaymen, publicans, and of those pioneers, those early colonists he was especially interested in. So I think we can see that interest in the importance of his work on people, again, in those biographies, Tangata Ngāi Tahu. But I also think a massive insights into the history of early Pākehā in the south sit within that Beattie collection too, largely undiscovered, nor really yet used in any kind of thoughtful way. And I think the collection offers incredibly rich windows into histories of family and community formation. It's terrific to hear from Janet this evening and to have so many members of the family here, and Toby too. I think if you read the papers, it is very hard not to be struck by the depth of his love for his family. His love for his parents and his siblings is very, very plain in his youthful writing, but also a wider set of familial connections, cousins and uncles and ancestors, thread right through the collection. I think it's really telling that in his first diary, he starts, on the second page, here is the history of my family. So family is absolutely central in his writings. So these papers are a treasure house of riches for historians, for those interested in the reo me maturaka of Ngāi Tahu Whānui, for people interested in the Pākehā history of the south. And now that they are digitised, I would encourage you all to explore them. They are now easily accessible, and you can all have the pleasure of enjoying Herries Beattie's impeccable penmanship. And that's something I really appreciate, because one of the great scars of my life, I will say something about myself. One of the great scars of my life was that in Standard 4, every other kid in my class was allowed to use a pen. I had to use a pencil because my writing was so messy. And that's one of the reasons I had Beattie on a pedestal. His penmanship is so incredible. So now you all, with these digitised archives, when you've got a quiet evening, you've got nothing left to stream, the Beattie collection is waiting for you. So from the comfort of your sofa, you can immerse yourself in the history of the South. So just a couple of final comments. I think this project is important, the fruits of it are important, but the way it's been undertaken is really important too. And it's been shaped by collaboration with the three local runaka and also by engagement with the Ngāi Tahu Archives team. Until recently, I was also a member of the University senior leadership team, and a few years ago I co-chaired the review of the Hocken Collections with Edward Ellison, Ōpoko of Ōtākou Whakaihu. That review panel encouraged Hocken Collections to deepen its engagement with mana whenua and to build stronger relationships grounded in the rich collections gathered here. Edward stressed repeatedly, as we worked on that report, the critical role of Hocken Collections as a front door to the relationship between mana whenua and the university. the collaborations at the heart of this project and the critical role played by kaimahi Māori are terrific models for future work of this kind. So I wanted to acknowledge the Hocken leadership, the members of the Project Advisory Committee and Hocken staff, especially Rohina, for bringing this very special undertaking through to completion. Now, I think all of you have had an easy ride. I think now is an opportunity for a little bit of audience participation. So, homai te paki paki for the project. Everyone involved in this has produced something of real significance for researchers here at Otago, for our teaching staff and students, for researchers actually across the Motu, and for all members of our communities, close and far away, who are interested in the South, its places, its peoples, its history. And of course that comes at a moment when the university itself is recognising, perhaps for the first time, the true importance of our location and the ways in which the peoples and the history of this place have shaped our tuakiritaka, our identity. I want to end, and this is a purely personal reflection, it's not a university reflection, it's a personal reflection, by suggesting that this is a collection that is not only of relevance to those of interested in Te Waipounamu, or especially Murihiku. I think this kind of collection is of significance for all New Zealanders more generally, especially at a moment when hostile voices once again repeatedly challenge the place of Te Reo Māori in our public institutions and question the value of cross-cultural engagement and collaboration. In a wānanga up at Waitangi in November, Tā Joe Williams spoke about Te Tiriti and the nature of cross-cultural engagements in these islands. He talked about the great importance of conversations across the void, ngā kupu me whakaaro, the words and ideas that span the gap between Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Pākehā. He spoke of our ancestors, both Māori and Pākehā, who were willing to cross that gap and to engage in genuine dialogue. He reminded us of the significance of those elements in our past and their critical importance in the here and now. With Tā Joe's words in mind, I think we can also see the national significance of Beattie's papers. They record a sustained set of conversations across and between the lines of cultural difference, conversations that occurred at a point where there was a powerful consensus about the superiority of Pākehā culture. But this project suggests something quite different, that in the Beattie collection we can see the convergence, the engagements and the coexistence of intellectual traditions. This rich storehouse of knowledge, now much more freely available, will enable many such future conversations. And I think that is a very good thing. Nō reira, e homa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tōtu katoa.
Thank you, Tony. We're almost at the end of the formal proceedings for the evening. Hocken staff have prepared a thank you for each of our speakers, so please join me in thanking them. So mihi to all of our speakers and everyone. Thank you all for attending as well. Before we close with a karakia, I'll just...
I would like to present this to the Ngāi Tahu Archives, so could I ask Gabrielle to come and receive it on the archives?
Do both. Thank you. It's a real privilege to receive these, and I'm excited about the collaboration and shared work that we'll have going forward.
So before we close with a karakia, I'd like just to explain the rest of the evening. So after karakia kai, we'll have kai in the foyer and seminar room. Please stay and enjoy that. But also, you're welcome to go into the research area to look at some of the physical and digital collections. Remember, the university bookshop is there if you want to purchase one of the books. If you do go through the doors, we do ask you to leave coats and bags in the locker room, which is just towards the far end on my left. But also to finish all your drinks and food before you go through, as we're really keen to preserve the collections and avoid any accidents. So, thank you all.
Tēnā nō tātou. Yeah, I'll just do a quick karakia for our kai and then we can carry on with the rest of tonight. E rongo ho mai ngā tipu hei whakaki te tinana hei oranga aueke hui e tā iki e. E kai.